Welcome back, everybody. My name is Ben Simmons. I'm a first-year internal medicine doctor. In my last video, we talked about my very first day as a resident. Go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. Since then, a lot of crazy things have happened. Most importantly, I got paid. So today we're going to talk about residency salaries, different ways residents get paid, and a wild story about gang members hiding in the hospital. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. So how exactly do residents get paid? The majority of residents' salaries are actually paid through the Medicare program. So the United States government is funding the training of its physician workforce, which makes a lot of sense because we're trying to cover this gap of the need for greater healthcare coverage, needing more physicians, so therefore we need more funding to train those physicians. Now the problem lies in that the amount of funding is generally limited. Medicare funding is limited, government spending funding is limited. So how much do residents actually get of all this funding? So the average resident's salary is actually between $55,000 and $65,000. There are different things that actually go into what kind of adjust this salary. For instance, more advanced hospitals that take care of more sick patients actually have starting salaries that are a little bit higher to account for this complexity in patient and the complexity of the training for those residents. Another interesting point is that what specialty you do in residency doesn't actually change your salary. So although we know plastic surgeons and orthopedic surgeons and even, let's say, cardiologists get paid some of the highest salaries, an orthopedic resident versus a plastic surgery resident versus a family medicine resident versus a cardiology fellow, if they're all in their fourth year, they'll all get the same amount of money. It's just you're getting paid based on how many years out from medical school you are. And that varies per institution. And again, that goes into how complex the institution, the patients that institution sees, as well as what is the geographic location. So typically you'll see New York City residents getting paid a little bit higher than some in the Midwest. For those of us who really want to be nosy, resident salaries are actually published on each program's individual website. So you can actually go, depending on whatever hospital you pick, say first year resident salary, and you can kind of get an idea if you want to really find out more in detail, especially if you're a med student and a few $1,000s difference may matter in your quality of life depending on the location, then that's something definitely to check out. While at an average of $60,000, I wouldn't say residents are poor, but they're definitely not amongst the top earners, and they're certainly not paid like attending physicians are. So they find interesting ways to supplement their annual salary to add a little bit of cash to help pay off those loans and rent in those more expensive cities. One way they do this is what's called moonlighting, where you can work overnight or even sometimes day shifts at local urgent cares or small hospitals and get paid a full attending salary for that one night's pay. So for instance, some residents get paid up to $1,000 a night to work those moonlighting shifts. The downside is you barely have enough time as it is as a resident. It's hard to sneak in another night's work to kind of help boost that salary. I say all that to say I'm super excited to have my first paycheck finally getting paid to be a doctor after third and fourth years of medical school, doing all that clinical work and still having to pay them. It finally feels good to be on the other side of things, though we're not at the attending salary yet. So now for that story that I promised you guys. Now, you're saying, what? A gang member hiding in the hospital? How did they get in the hospital? Where are they hiding? Well, listen here. So, I was on what's called the Crisis ED team. It's an emergency department team that is ran by psychiatrists. So it's mainly a psychiatry team that is dealing with patients that have mental illness that puts themselves or others in immediate danger. Now, so you would expect people that are coming in with attempted suicides to be seen by psychiatry. There are also some patients that are less suspecting that also get picked up by the Crisis ED team. So on this day that I was working with the crisis team, we came across a patient who looked like they had just gone through some facial trauma with a broken jaw, but at the same time, they seemed a little flat in their affect, as in you couldn't really tell what their mood was. And they were saying that they had plans to kill themselves. But it was weird in that they didn't really seem sad. They didn't really necessarily fit some of the profiles that we expect when people come into the emergency room with imminent attempts at suicide. So the psychiatrist wanted to exercise a little bit extra caution. He did a further physical exam. First, of course, we made sure that everything got checked out for their jaw. And then he did a full skin test. And he said in that skin test that he was actually looking for gang member tattoos. And at first I thought, well, that's a little bit prejudiced. Why are we basing our care off of this? And he said, no, well, you have to use your clinical judgment and be able to discern what the difference between judgment and clinical judgment is. So he used his clinical judgment and decided that this patient may actually be in danger from a rival gang or even within his own gang because he recognized the gang tattoos. And so because of that, we had to make sure we put special precautions on this patient's file so that anyone who came in from the outside wouldn't be able to locate this patient in the hospital. The broken jaw just kind of added to his clinical suspicion that something was up. Maybe he had gotten beaten up and was afraid for worse or retaliation and now was coming in to seek refuge in the hospital. But it's still our job, no matter what, to take care of all their medical problems. So we definitely had to tend to his jaw. We had to tend to whatever depression that he was going through. In addition, we had to attend to this possible suicide attempt and find out what the reasoning, what the motive, where his cause was coming from, and determine if he or anyone else in the hospital was in danger because of what he was going through. So it was an amazing just clinical experience for me to really see how you have to be careful not to judge people because of specific gang affiliations, but at the same time, you have to be able to know when that gang affiliation may be putting that person or the other people in danger. Now, I hope you found that story as exciting as I did. Next week, I'm going to be talking a little bit about different ways residents can invest their money, jumping off this salary talk, and a little bit about my week in addiction medicine. Stay tuned. Subscribe, like, comment below.